slow way they move.
It's just the movement of them.
They just give me the creeps.
Really slimy.
Or you see a
I
snake.
can't stand the...
That's it, I go the opposite way.
Well, they look nasty.
Slimy creatures to me.
I wouldn't like to go too close to it.
I have this feeling that they would be slimy, slithery.
Horrible, yeah.
They're just
I always think they're going to move so fast, faster than I can move away.
Thou art cursed above all cattle, and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life.
Evil, slinky,
Don't
and
like
silent.
it.
It's just a slithering, isn't it?
I can't imagine.
Oh, it's all slimy.
Our reactions to snakes are still, subconsciously perhaps, influenced by the myths that have surrounded them since prehistory. But if we can look at a snake with an unprejudiced eye, we will discover a most remarkable creature which manages to survive very efficiently in a hostile world. Man has brought devastation to this Welsh cliff top. His scrub burning will kill a great many of the animals that live here. For an adder, freshly emerged from hibernation, the only hope of survival is to move. We use the expression snake in the grass for someone who is traitorous and deceitful. But if we look at the world from the snake's point of view, that surely is a libel. It's early spring. This adder has spent the winter in a communal den below ground. The spring sunshine draws the newly emerged snakes together. These are the strange snake meetings of legend. Up to 100 individuals may assemble in one writhing mass. They're all males. The females are still below ground and won't join the males for another 2 weeks. The adder, or viper, is Britain's only venomous snake and warns of the fact with a V spelt out on its neck. But there's nothing sinister about these gatherings. These cold-blooded reptiles are congregating here for just one reason: warmth. Their bodies became very cold during hibernation. Now they assemble on prime basking sites to absorb the sun's heat and gather enough energy for their first act of the year, the shedding of the skin. The first sign is a clouding of the eye. It's caused by a secretion from glands below the skin, which separates the old, worn-out skin from the new. It's a process that will be repeated several times a year. The skin comes off in one piece, splitting first at the head. As a snake travels to the undergrowth, the old skin catches on plants and stones and begins to peel backwards. This sloughing of the skin helps rid the snake of parasites and allows it to grow. In the past, this habit enhanced the supernatural reputation of snakes. It was interpreted as proof of immortality. The snake never died. It simply shed its skin, leaving behind a ghostly replica of the snake that had worn it. Now the females join the gathering. Their duller markings and larger heads contrast with the smaller males. They will all lie together for several weeks. The gathering becomes increasingly restless. It's around this time of year that strange sights are sometimes seen. Dancing snakes. This was once thought to be a courtship ritual, but in fact these are both males, and they're trying to push one another to the ground. The snakes are battling over the females. Although their movements may become very intense, they never injure or bite each other. At times, their combat can be as graceful as the dancing of legend. Lionel Kellaway, an ex-gamekeeper with a passion for snakes, is now a research student at Swansea University. He's collected these adders in the course of a research program that has already revealed new facts about their behavior. He carries out his studies on a very small area of the Gower Peninsula, inside an enclosure in the grounds of Swansea University.
I've always had a particular soft spot for the adder, and I find its combat one of the most exciting of all reptile behaviours. It occurs during the spring mating period, and I've found that males court in response to a female-produced odour, which also seems to prepare the males for combat. It's the intrusion of another male on these courting couples which appears to trigger the combat behaviour. A combat is a trial of strength, and the stronger, larger males generally become dominant to the weaker and thus get greater access to the available females. Combat bouts are punctuated by brief periods where the movements which seem to maintain it are lost. They seem to be decision points where combatants will either re-engage or combatants will break off. During these combat bouts, the snakes appear oblivious to their surroundings. At the final decision point, the stronger male, the then dominant male, will often chase off the weaker and then return to the female, over which the combat first started. From there, he will recommence courtship with the female and defend her and the available basking site from the attentions of other males.
But what was it that triggered combat between the males? Would they fight with a model snake? By imitating the movements of a real snake, Lionel is able to induce them to fight. The model had to be moving, but were the zigzag markings necessary? Lionel tries the snake again, this time with a handling stick, and still the snake dances. His next experiment seems to prove that the snake responds mainly to movement. It appears to mistake his finger for a rival snake. The fact that Lionel's finger is within easy striking distance shows that even though the adder is venomous, it has no real inclination to harm man. Many of the myths about snakes endow them with a phallic significance and make them the very epitome of sexuality. The truth about their sexual behaviour, however, is perhaps even stranger than the legends. Their actual courtship begins as a gentle affair, the male licking the female with rapid flicks of his tongue and passing his body over hers. This may continue for several days, interrupted only by the male fighting off rivals. The courting male waits for the female to respond by raising her tail. He then attempts to mate. This time, he's unsuccessful. He may have to try many times before he succeeds. His sexual organ has 2 prongs, but only one of them is used at a time. As they're covered with soft spines, once coupled, the male may have trouble freeing himself. Consequently, mating may be very prolonged, lasting up to 4 hours. The female will often move away during this time, dragging the smaller but unresisting male behind her. After mating, the female spends much of her time basking. The eggs stay in her body until they're ready to hatch, and, like a mobile incubator, she keeps them warm by seeking the sunshine, a technique that helps the adder to breed farther north than any other snake. This need for warmth is the main reason that Britain has only 3 kinds of snakes. The ancients believed in a more supernatural reason. They thought that the rowan, the magical tree, destroyed them. Our ignorance of our own British snakes was such that one species remained unrecognised until the end of the last century. Today it survives only on a few heaths in southern England. It's the smooth snake. It's harmless, feeding mainly on lizards. It's sometimes mistaken for an adder, but its slender head lacks the V-shaped mark, and its body has no zigzag. Like the adder, it retains its eggs in its body until they hatch. That snakes lay eggs at all would have surprised our ancestors. They believed in a theory of spontaneous generation, that a fallen horsehair could miraculously turn into a living snake, particularly if it fell into liquid manure. Perhaps the legend grew from finding young snakes around manure heaps, which is where you can often discover our 3rd British snake, the grass snake.
I know, well, like everything else, it's time, isn't it? They take a lot of picking.
Unlike the adder, the grass snake doesn't retain its eggs inside its body. Instead, it depends on these piles of decaying vegetation to provide warmth for their incubation.
Rain help, so it's no problem, really, and taking the weeds out. That's difficult, not sort of word, sort of. How big a cup?
Many grass snakes will be drawn to the same site, and it's this tendency that brings the harmless grass snake into many a garden. The egg-laying chamber has been created by the bodies of the snakes. Up to 40 may congregate in a large compost heap. They may spend several days within their chamber before egg-laying begins. As many as 50 eggs may be laid by each female. She will then leave them alone in this man-made incubator to be warmed by the heat of decay. The young will hatch out through the parchment-like shell 2 months after they're laid. With many hundreds of eggs laid together, their synchronized hatch may well be the source of tales about snake plagues.
There we are, Piggy. Now you can have your quick slurp.
Is that the one you made?
The young grass snakes will not stray far from their compost heap, and their unwitting human benefactors have provided something else in this garden that suits them very well. And grass snakes that hatched last year are already hunting there.
There we are then, Piggy. Tadpole and
Lovely tadpole.
then we are John. Marjorie, yours.
Thank you, Dennis.
And that's yours.
Smaller than a pencil, this yearling grass snake is watching for signs of its tiny prey.
Very solid. We went to Courtship this morning. Lovely garden.
It will spend many hours hunting the tadpoles. It relies mainly on sight, so the trick is to find the spot in the duckweed where the tadpoles regularly surface for air.
Archways into different areas.
This is quite a large paddock, but there's at least an acre of garden.
But it really does go exactly where we'll go to the church. Oh, yeah, where the
Lovely sort of archways in the windows and the house.
If catching a tadpole can be a problem for such a little snake, swallowing it certainly isn't any easier.
Go over to Bath for an hour or two in the afternoon.
Yes, fine.
What time are you thinking of going after lunch?
Well, no, I think if we have a coffee with Peggy, we'll go straight on and get ourselves a bite in the pub.
Well, I've got a bit of a bun fight on Wednesday afternoon. Are you going down in Church Road? It's the Women's Institute.
Women's Institute, I didn't go to that. Yes, well, the one on the edge of the pool here, that doesn't,
That one.
the slugs don't seem to come and have a look at it.
The adder hunts away from man. Its forked tongue, in our eyes a symbol of falsehood, is the snake's most trusted organ. It isn't used for stinging, but as a scent collector to carry scent particles in the air back to a tasting organ in its mouth. The snake seems to stare simply because it has no eyelids. It was once thought to be able to hypnotize its prey, but in fact its eyes have poor definition and are sensitive primarily to movement. With these two senses alone, it does its hunting, for a snake has no ears. According to the book of Genesis, its limbs were lost through a curse, but in fact its streamlined shape is an advantage when moving through thick vegetation. It's able to move forward by sending a muscular wave back along its body as it makes contact with the undergrowth. The scales on its underside give it purchase. It's also able to produce smaller muscular ripples to help it along. Snakes are believed to be descended from lizards that took to burrowing and lost their legs. Although most snakes have now returned to the surface, many still go underground to hunt. Here, its loss of limbs and elongated body give it an advantage over most other predators. The adder eats mainly small mammals. Its quarry here is a wood mouse. The adder, without legs, can't move as fast as the mouse, so a chase would be pointless. Another technique is to lie in ambush and wait for a mouse simply to turn up. The mouse has only a few minutes to live. A stab of the fangs has injected venom, which will soon take its effect. The adder is in no hurry. The bite of a healthy mouse can, perhaps surprisingly, kill a snake, so it will wait until the mouse is almost dead before tracking it down by scent. The adder takes its prey head first. Its jaws can dislocate and the surrounding skin stretch to accommodate its victim. Snakes have been known to survive as long as a year on a single meal. But for an active adder, a meal like this lasts about 2 weeks. Late summer. For 4 months, eggs have been developing inside the female. We are about to witness a rare sight, an adder birth. The egg is covered by a transparent membrane. Within the female, protected by her body wall, it has no need of a shell. The young snake ruptures the membrane with its head. Six to 12 young are born. They struggle for many minutes before they finally release themselves. They are entering a perilous world, easy morsels for many predators. As adults, their main enemy will be man. Persecuted for centuries, the adder has good reason to fear us. But should we fear the adder? A fully grown adult, basking in the sun. It may be motionless, but it's fully alert. Its eyes are acutely sensitive to movement, although it can see sharply only at close range. The snake is relying on sight and scent to warn it of possible danger. Without hearing, the world it perceives is a silent one. A typical end to a typical encounter. The snake avoids man before man has even seen it. It will only bite if trapped or threatened, and although the bite is painful, it practically never causes death. In fact, you're 100 times more likely to be struck by lightning than to be killed by an adder. Late autumn. The adder is returning to the protection of the earth, back into the viper's den. The days are now too cold for the snake to remain active, so it will spend the winter in this small cavern underground. Snakes return here year after year. Protected from frost and away from man, they won't emerge until next spring. Perhaps, as we learn more about their lives, that world to which they return may become a more sympathetic one.
Quite interesting to look
They
at.
ought to be preserved and cared for.
Beautiful.
I like snakes. It doesn't frighten me in the slightest.
I didn't
Not
like
wet and
snakes.
slimy like they say.
They're dry, aren't they? They're not
Slimy like
They're all
everything.
right. Don't bother me.
No, it'll be preserved and cared
Not
for.
wet and slimy like they say.
Nice.
Or like
I
you
like
think
snakes.
it is.
It doesn't frighten me in the slightest.
Don't bother me.
Oh, they're interesting.
They're dry, aren't they?
It's not wet and slimy like they say. Or like you think it is.
I'm scared of them.
It's beautiful.
Nice. I like the thing about their scales on their backs. They're pretty.